YouTube, it's Tone back with another one for you. This one is a continuation of Meet Your Strawman, number 11 here. So let's get right into this shit. It's like 6 or 7 slides. So here it says, for evil to triumph, all that is necessary is for good men to do nothing. And that's a fact. All you gotta do is nothing and fucking watch everything fall to shit, literally. So it says here, why did the United States attack Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Yemen? Why are the U.S. operatives helping to destabilize Syria? And why is the United States government so intent on taking down Iran in spite of the fact that Iran has not attacked anyone since 1798? And what's next? What are we headed for? When you look at the current trajectory that we are on, it doesn't make any sense that at all if you evaluate it on what we are taught in school. And school is all fucking bullshit. So I tell my son, I'm like, to just focus on math, spelling, and reading because essentially once you understand just those few fundamental elements of the language and all that, you can fucking calculate anything with gematria, and then you can read anything as long as you know how to fucking read, right? So everything else I tell him is a lie because it is history. All that's just fucking bullshit. And it doesn't make any sense if you base your worldview on the propaganda that the mainstream media tries to pass off as news. But it makes perfect sense once you know the real motives of the powers that be. In order to understand those motives, we first have to take a look at history. In 1945, Britain, with agreement, established the dollar as the world's reserve currency, which meant that international commodities were priced in dollars. The agreement, which gave the United States a distinct financial advantage, was made under the condition that those dollars would remain redeemable for gold at a consistent rate of $35 per ounce. The United States promised not to print very much money, but this was on the honor system because the Federal Reserve refused to allow any audit or supervisions of its printing presses. In the years leading up to 1970s, expenditures in the Vietnam War made it clear to many countries that the U.S. was printing far more money than it had in gold. And in response, they began to ask for their gold back. This, of course, set off a rapid decline in the value of the dollar. The situation climaxed in 1971 when France attempted to withdraw its gold and Nixon refused. On the 15th of August, Nixon made the following announcement. And so that's the thing too, is that these people are just printing out dollar bills with nothing to back them up. The more money that they print, the more that the dollar value goes down. That's why everybody thought that they were getting some type of deal by them giving you them stimulus checks and shit. All they did was devalue the currency. And that's why everything costs how much it costs now. So I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take actions necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets except in amounts and in conditions determined to be in the best interest of the monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States. This was obviously not a temporary suspension, as he claimed, but rather a permanent default. And as for the rest of the world who had entrusted the United States with their gold, it was outright theft. And gold's a whole nother thing too. They got people out here digging for that shit, and it's not even necessary. You know what I'm saying? I mean, possibly we'll get into what gold actually is and silver and all that shit at some point and shit, but it ain't what you think it is. So in 1973, President Nixon asked King Faisal of Saudi Arabia to accept only U.S. dollars in payment for oil and to invest any excess profits in U.S. Treasury bonds, notes, and bills. In return, Nixon offered military protection for Saudi oil fields. The same offer was extended to each of the key oil-producing countries, and by 1975, every member of OPEC had agreed to only sell their oil to the U.S. The act of moving the dollar off gold and trying it in foreign oil instantly forced every oil-importing country in the world to maintain a constant supply of Federal Reserve notes, paper, and that they would get a second real physical goods. Okay, so this was the birth of the petrodollar. Paper went out, everything America needed came in. The United States got very, very rich as a result, and it was the largest financial coin in recorded history. The largest financial con in recorded history. The arms race of the Cold War was a game of poker. Military expenditures were the chips, and the U.S. had an endless supply of chips, With the petrodollar under its belt, it was able to raise the stakes higher and higher, outspending every other country on the planet until eventually the U.S. military expenditure surpassed that of all the other nations of the world combined. The Soviet Union never had a chance. Never had a chance. So let's see what we got. The collapse of the communist bloc in 1991 removed the last counterbalance to American military might. The United States was now an undisputed superpower with no rival. Many hoped that this would mark the start of a new era of stability and peace. Unfortunately, there were those in high places who had other ideas. Within the same year, the U.S. invaded Iraq in the first Gulf War after crushing the Iraqi military and destroying their infrastructure, including hospitals and water purification plants. Crippling sanctions were imposed, which prevented Iraq's infrastructure from being rebuilt. So these sanctions were initiated by Bush Sr. and sustained through the entire Clinton administration, lasted for over a decade, and were estimated to have killed more than 500,000 children. The Clinton administration was fully aware of these figures. An ATV interview was speaking on Madeleine Albright, Secretary of the State for Clinton. We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children that had died in Hiroshima, and is the price worth it? Now, mind you, I look at all this information here with a speculative eye. I highly doubt that any of this shit even really happened, and that the numbers weren't even fucking close to as high as what they say it was. I'm just reading you this shit because it's in the fucking story, right? So I'm just gonna throw that out there just so you know. I don't believe personally that much of this shit really even happened like that. I think that much of this shit was just to scare people. So Miss Albright, what exactly was worth killing 500,000 children for? In November 2000, Iraq began selling its oil exclusively in euros. That was a direct attack on the dollar and the U.S. financial dominance, and it wasn't going to be tolerated. In response, the U.S. government, with the assistance of the mainstream media, began to build up a massive propaganda campaign claiming that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and was planning to use them. Right? I remember all that shit too, when all that shit had taken place. That shit was corny as fuck, and it still is. Even just the whole corny ass story of it. So in 2003, the U.S. invaded, and once they had control of the country, oil sales were immediately switched back to dollars. This, and particularly noticeable as switching back to the dollar, meant 15 to 20% loss in revenue due to the euro's higher value. It doesn't make any sense at all unless you take the petrodollar into account. On March 2nd, 2007, U.S. General Wesley Clark, so I came back to see him in a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war in Iraq? And he says, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk and picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs today. This is a memo which describes how we are going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting off with Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off in Iran. And so that was all just a plot too for them to take over and put in their fucking fiat bank systems, right? They wanted to get their central banks and everywhere because nobody gives a fuck about them unless they think that they're fucking controlling the money. And these people don't even know how any of these money system works. So once they fucking establish those, they get everybody into debt, fake debt, and then turn them into slaves essentially. So let's take a look at the events of the past decades to see a pattern. In Libya, Gaddafi was in the process of organizing a bloc of African countries to create a gold-based currency called the dinar, which they intended to use to replace the dollar in that region. Now, mind you, all these people are all fucking actors. Gaddafi, all these motherfuckers are all actors. They all work for the same people, all right? Just so you know. So every time they go and they put an actor in to pretend like he's gonna fucking help the country and turn it back into gold-based anything, then they end up fucking fake assassinating these fucking people. So none of the real people stand up and ever fucking do anything because they think that they'll get killed too, which they more than likely will not get fucking killed if they stand up and do something. But it takes for somebody to stand up and do something for them to fucking sit the fuck down. But they're not going to, as long as they keep on acting like they're fucking killing people when they're not. You know what I'm saying? To fucking keep it to keep anybody from standing up and actually doing something. It's really all just a fucking theater, a stage. So, and if they really do start killing people like that, they will get fucking smoked, and they do know that. So they put on a show and make it look like they're fucking doing that when in all reality they're not doing that. Why? Because they can't do that shit, because that's against the fucking rules. These fucking punk ass pussies cannot do that shit, but they'll have you believe that they do. Okay? So U.S. and NATO forces helped to destabilize and topple the government in 2011, and after taking control of the region, U.S. armed rebels executed Gaddafi, this is all fake, in cold blood and immediately set up the Libyan central bank. Iran has actively campaigning to pull oil sales off the dollar for some time now, and it has recently secured agreements to trade its oil in exchange for gold. In response to the U.S. government, with mainstream media assistance, has been attempting to build international support for military strikes on the pretext of preventing Iran from building a nuclear weapon. In the meantime, they established sanctions which they admit are aimed at causing a collapse in the Iranian economy. Economy. Iranian economy. That was a tough one. But trust me though, man, if these fucking punks could really do shit like that, then they would be doing that. They're not out there killing people like that. They just putting it on TV, making it look like they're fucking doing it, so nobody actually stands up. Syria and Iran's closest ally, and they are bound by mutual defense agreements. The country is currently in the process of being destabilized with covert assistance from NATO, and although Russia and China have warned the United States not to get involved, the White House has made statements in the past month indicating that they are considering military intervention. It should be clear that the military intervention in Syria and Iran isn't just being considered, it is a foregone conclusion. Just as it was in Iraq, Libya, the U.S. is actively working to create the context which gives them the diplomatic cover to do what they have already planned. The motive for these invasions and covert actions become clear when we look at them in their full context and connect the dots. Those who control the United States understand that if even a few countries begin to sell their oil in another currency, it will set off a chain reaction and the dollar will collapse. They understand that there is absolutely nothing else holding up the value of the dollar at this point, and so does the rest of the world. But instead of accepting that fact, the dollar is nearing the end of its lifespan. The powers that be have made a calculated gambit that they have decided to use the brute force of the U.S. military to crush each and every resistance state in Africa and in the Middle East. That in and of itself would be bad enough, but what you need to understand is that this is not going to end with Iran. China, Russia stated publicly and in no uncertain times that they will not tolerate an attack on Iran or in Syria. You see, so they gotta have everybody else fucking agreeing with what it is that they're doing, and if not, then they will get smoked. And it's really and that's really how shit works. But as long as it's all really theater and nobody really fucking dies, then nobody fucking stands up and does anything, and nobody really has to pay any prices because nobody really fucking died. But you think that they did. See that? So it's just fucking ridiculous. So anyway, Iran, one of their key allies and one of the last independent oil producers in the region, as they understand that if Iran falls, then they will have no way to escape the dollar without going to war. And yet the United States is pushing forward in spite of the warnings that we are witnessing here is a trajectory which leads straight to the unthinkable. It is a trajectory which was mapped out years ago in full awareness of the human consequences. But who was it that put us on this course? What kind of psychopath is willing to intentionally set off a global conflict which leads to millions of deaths just to protect the value of a fiat paper currency? It obviously isn't the president. The decision to invade Iraq, Libya, and Iran was made, long before Obama had risen to the national spotlight. And yet he is carrying out his duties just like the puppets who preceded him. And that's the thing, is that all these motherfucking puppets are just all working for the same group of people. So who is it that pulls the strings? Often the best answers to questions like this are found by asking another question, who's the one that benefits? So obviously those who have the power to print the dollar out of thin air have the most to lose if the dollar were to fall. And since 1913, that power has been held by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a private entity owned by a conglomerate of the most powerful banks in the world. Men and women, those who control the banks are the ones who pull the strings. To them, this is just a game. Your life, the lives of those you love are just pawns over their chessboard. And like a spoiled four-year-old who tips over the board on the floor, when he starts to lose, the powers that be are willing to start World War III to keep the global financial system. And that's what it is. And they really ain't doing shit. They're not causing no wars or doing no fucking gangster shit like that. They're just putting it on TV and just trying to throw fucking spokes in the wheel of the American people and the lives that we live, and just trying to fuck it up little by little to make themselves seem fucking relevant. And any way that they can, they're trying to seem relevant, but they're really not. So it is a game of chess. Stop playing checkers with these fucking assholes. That's what I got for you for now. Until we meet again.